Right. Good afternoon. If we could just have some quiet and start the afternoon session again. Thank you. We've heard some very passionate speakers this morning. So passionate and so entertaining that our afternoon speakers are somewhat alarmed that they have to follow those previous speakers. The only thing I would like to say is that I do know that there are a lot of people in recovery here today. Please don't be quiet about your recovery. Go back, see your doctors, see your drug workers, see anybody that had anything to do with you when you were using, because that's one of the best ways in which you can carry a message of recovery and show people that recovery is possible and works. We have a range of speakers now, but before that, Noreen has some announcements to make.
God, I think it's been a really, really brilliant morning so far. You know, just the energy that's in the room and looking around and seeing all those rehab grad T-shirts. I'd like to say thank you to Paul Rubin, who did those T-shirts for us, so a huge, huge thank you for that. But it is, and I think, you know, talking to everybody at lunchtime and everybody saying how they've enjoyed the event, we can only get stronger now, we can only grow, but we can only do it together, and we need to start doing that. We need to be a much, much stronger voice that is out there, because there's a hell of a lot of power in here, and there's a hell of a lot of energy, and there's a hell of a lot of passion to get this agenda moved forward and to get people moved into abstinence treatment and to grow our own recovery communities. It's happening. There's good patches of practice across the country. So, you know, if you are one of those practitioners, share what you've got. That's what it's all about. Share what you've got, share your knowledge, and allow people to come and visit. It's no good keeping it to ourselves. We can't get people into recovery if we think that our recovery community is ours, and I don't want people pinching my ideas. That's not how it works. In terms of BAC, O'Connor Gateway, we have some of our trustees here today as well. Anybody is welcome to see what we're doing, and we will share what we're doing with you to help you grow your recovery communities. Just a couple of quick announcements. A massive thanks to the rehab grads. You've done a fantastic job. I'll say it now and then I'll say it afterwards. There is an open NACA an AA meeting at 4:30, and they're in rooms 4 and 5. So everybody, if you want to go in there, that starts at 4:30. In the meantime, I think it's over to you, Chip, isn't it? For your introduction, and let's get this session rolling. Let's go.
This isn't going to be a long speech. I would just like to introduce Mike from RAPT, Mike Trace, who I'm sure many of you know. He's worn many different hats in his life. I'm not quite sure which one he's wearing today, but Mike.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much to Noreen and Chip for the introduction. The morning session was really interesting, and I think the morning session, when you were designing this program, you had the morning session was the cool people. You had the Russell Brands, you had the Stuart Honours, and all the cool people, charismatic speeches. The next section, and I exclude some of my colleagues from this, is the blokes in suits part of the day. And I'm happy to kick off the blokes in suits bit and hope that I can reflect in a bit of the coolness from this morning. Very happy to be here. As the introduction says, I'm the Chief Executive of RAPT, Rehabilitation of Addicted Prisoners Trust, which is a charity that pretty much does what it says on the tin. We are an organisation that's been around for 21 years now, 22, now we're into 2014, and we, in the whole history of RAPT, have been about helping people with a history of dependence and offending to get recovery, that word recovery. So we've been about that from day one. I'm very proud to say that we're about that now. We're a very different scale and size of organisation, but that's fundamentally what we're about. So we like to do anything that helps what the objective is of this event. We like to help anybody who tries to help the sector and the people who work in the sector and the general public to understand what real recovery is. And that is the work of the gods, and we'll support anybody who tries to do that work, and we try to do it ourselves. So from day one, I've always supported what Noreen and others have tried to do with Recovery Group UK. Very supportive of what we're hearing about, and we'll hear more about later this afternoon, about Give It Up, and very supportive of any provider, and we've heard of many today, been talking to many out in the display area there, who genuinely try to find peer-based recovery models, mutual aid peer support models to help individuals help themselves to get to travel those pathways to recover. So RAPT will get behind anybody who's trying to do that, and we spend all our energies trying to do that within our own sphere of influence. I'm also happy to hear from Russell Brand this morning. He's always entertaining, he's always interesting, but something behind that sort of mask, and Russell always says all those figures confuse me, and all this complexity and this government stuff confuses me. But over the last 6 months or so, I don't know Russell, I'm not claiming any closeness to him, but I see him interviewed on TV. I saw the documentary did. I see him give Paxman interviews and row with Peter Hitchens. And some of the things he says about the nature of addiction and the nature of treatment and the nature of policy on these issues are far more perceptive than I've heard for years in this sector. And I've been around a bit. I've worked in the provider sector, in the commissioning sector, in the government, and in the international sector. And most people, as Russell says, and as several of the other speakers this morning says, most people in that world do not fundamentally understand drug use, addiction, and recovery. And that is something we're always going to have to keep working about and working to help people understand and help them to manage their sphere of influence so they really get it. And I still think we've got a massive battle on our hands here. The majority, one of the things I'm going to say about the RAPT services in a moment, is we do most of our work in prisons, and what we would wish, we don't want to run it ourselves, but what we would wish is that anybody who takes those difficult steps on the road to recovery while they're in prison, when they walk out of prison or get transferred to another prison, they immediately find their people who they can look to for support. They can immediately find the sort of networks of support that they can have faith in and work with. And I've got to say, in most parts of the country, that's still not there. And I'm really surprised. I remember, I always say this to Noreen, I remember meeting Noreen end of the last century. That seems a really long time ago, but looking at Burton in those days, and I was the government guy then, looking at that and say, yeah, every town should have one of these, yeah? And that's 15 years ago. Every town hasn't got one of these, yeah? We're hearing lots of great stories about some of these initiatives and some of these areas where people have got really thriving mutual aid recovery communities, but it's still a handful. It's still not across the country. So the reality is, for anybody in RAPT who comes out of prison and we want to say, you're going to this place or that place, I won't name any, we haven't got places to tap them into. Or you've got to go through massively bureaucratic procedures to get them funded to go into a service where there's a chance of recovery. So we've got a long way to travel yet. Now, all of that wasn't the speech I was going to give. The time is short. I think we've started a bit late. But I am going to say a few things. I don't know if my slides are available, because that's not them. Anybody in the technical side got my slideshow? There we go. I'm going to whiz through this, and I'll give you apologies for that, but I think if we're going to stay on track this afternoon, I'm going to whiz through it very quick. But I'm going to describe how RAPT tries to do recovery communities in prisons, and then say a few things about the process of ongoing support. Next slide, please. So basically, recovery communities in prisons, it is different in trying to run the same type of principle outside, but we are Raptor in 28 prisons around the country, and in each of those we have a version of a recovery community. And in most, I'll fess up to you, in most of those 28, they are not complete all sing and all dance in recovery communities, because prisons are hard to work in and create those supportive environments. But generally, what we try to do, and I increasingly refer to these as the essential ingredients, we try to create the conditions in any prison we work in where there is, first of all, the right environment for recovery. So you hear about recovery wings, but basically it's any location where the prisoner is getting more peer pressure and peer support to believe in and follow recovery, then they're getting peer pressure and support and peer peer pressure to buy drugs. Yeah? So in prison, most prison locations, you've got an awful lot of pressure to be a drug user. In our locations, as far as possible, we try to make it that the peer pressure on you and the peer support on you is to remain abstinent. So there's a location issue, and that is a lot to do with transfer policies and incentives and earned privileges. If the prison regime is right to say, if you're making that attempt to try to stay abstinent and try and deal with your dependence and to get into recovery, then you will be supported by the prison transfer policies, and you'll be supported by the prison incentives and privileges schemes. Now that is reasonably easy in concept. It's a bugger day to day. Every prison we work in, it is a fight to try and maintain good, solid, supportive recovery locations and environments. Second thing there, it's crucial, essential ingredients is the people. As everybody has said, and everybody in this audience will agree, this is a very human process. You can't do this by paperwork. You have to attract by the people who are involved, and the people who are considering whether they want to follow recovery pathways have got to have trust and support and faith in the people they're dealing with. And for me, in an organisation like RAPT, that's having skilled, motivated staff, a high proportion of whom are in their own recovery, is to have a massive peer support network revolving around all these prisons and beyond, and to have prison acceptance of that pathway of recovery, which is, as you can imagine, one of the really tough things. Most of us who went into prisons doing this work a long time ago knows what it's like, that everybody spits in your tea and calls you a Care Bear and says anybody who's going into those recovery programs. That shows that they need to be identified for greater security. So having a prison acceptance, a more general prison culture acceptance of the recovery process is a really crucial part of this. And I'm happy to say in most of the prisons we work in, we have a very good and mutually supportive relationship with the prison management. Now, the importance of continuity, next slide please. Oh, I've got it here. So I'm having a go at people for not doing the slides. Thank you, whoever's pressing a button somewhere. I'm meant to be doing it myself. The what happens next is our biggest headache at RAPT. People go through our programs, go through our recovery wings, go through our sort of core components, and it's big numbers. You know, it's 800 prisoners a year complete a RAPT program, 500 to 600 a year of those come out of prison, and there's around 5,000 people who would call themselves a RAPT graduate who are out in the community, living out in the community now, ex-prisoners. To create the follow-up care for those people that we want to is kind of both easy and hard. The easy bit, because we work according to the 12-step model in our programs, the easy bit is people get tapped into the fellowships and all of the networks that come with that. So that's very helpful. But RAPT, like most service providers, don't only do 12-step programs. So we do a lot of recovery motivation and support for people who've decided not to follow the 12-step model. And you know, we need to be able to have the same sort of immediacy and clarity of support structures for them. So a real dilemma for us is how you mix or don't mix those sort of groups, people following different sort of pathways to recovery. But they all need that sort of closeness and sureness of the support they'll have at the next stage. And then this is what brings me back, and I do apologize for whizzing through this quick, but that brings me back to that thing I was mentioning at the top of the speech, is that really, when it comes down to it, what should be there for our guys when they go to another prison or another part of the country or go back out into the community, it should be just like that. Here is the recovery networks, the social networks, the recovery community in the town that you're being released to, where your family is, where you want to conduct the next stage of your life. Here's the guys who do it, here's what they do. Turn up next Monday, have a chat with them and see how you fit in there. That's what we should be able to do. I think we're only able to do that in a real minority of cases. In most of the cases of the guys who get through really difficult self-examinations in really difficult environments in prisons, the message we give to most of them is we'll do our best to try and tap you into an appointment when you come out. We'll try and get you some community care funding for second stage. We'll try to get you into employment pathways. And don't get me wrong, we do loads of that, and I'm very proud of what we do with that. But we're not in a position to say wherever you're going to go in the country, there is where the recovery community and social network is in that part of the country. So it's a long way to go to get to that. So for commissioners in the room, and I was listening to the speeches from Rosanna and others in the morning, saying perfectly good things from a government perspective to say we want commissioners to focus on a recovery in their commissioning. Really, really take that seriously. That is not about, as somebody said this morning, changing the brand and the heading and doing the same thing with a different name on it. That is not just about saying, well, let's do a bit of pathways to employment, let's do better housing provision. That is making sure in your town, in your area that you're responsible for, there is a thriving recovery community. And as I say, we can't say that in most towns in the country at the moment. Final little statement from me, sort of personal statement on recovery capital. I think there's a really wicked issue within what we were talking this morning about recovery capital. Because it's clearly right, it's something I call motherhood and apple pie, that people are more likely to make progress and be successful in their recovery journey if they have good quality accommodation, if they have good friendship networks, if they have good access to meaningful activity. All true, all absolutely true. But be really careful about what I call the chicken and egg problem of that. If somebody isn't changing inside, if they're not really feeling better about themselves, feeling better about their relationships to society, you could have the best house in the world, you could have the best job in the world, you could have the best network of positive role models. But if you haven't changed inside, you won't make that progress. So I do worry when I see a lot of people talking about recovery capital, thinking that means an employment advisor or Job Centre Plus, or it means a better housing allocation. None of that is going to work in terms of long-term recovery for individuals or communities unless you're finding a way to enable people to make those personal changes. And then they'll get the housing right, they'll get the access to employment right. That's been our experience at RAPT. So let's not think that we can just, as I say, run a housing scheme or run an employment access scheme and everything else falls into place. I want to end with an announcement. I said earlier on that, I'm pleased to be sharing a platform with Russell, or a conference with Russell Brand. Russell's going to come back up at some point in the afternoon. Russell's been to a couple of our projects and has seen what RAPT does, and we are happy to announce today that Russell Brand is going to become a patron of RAPT and will be involved in our work, and I hope that's going to be one of the ways in which the continuing work between Give It Up and the service providers, RG UK and RAPT, are going to continue in the future. So thanks very much for your time. Look forward to it. Cheers.
Thank you for that, Mike, and I'd also like to say thank you, Mike, for helping us fund this event today. Really, really appreciate that. Mike said recovery rates are high. Recovery rates are high. We now know that from the analysis that's been done from the NDTMS data. But as I said earlier, we can get those bigger, we can get those higher, and we can get them more sustainable by working together. I'm now going to introduce Russell, because obviously Russell went out and raised the money for Give It Up. But I just want to say a few quick words of how I met Russell. I met Russell about a year ago through Mitch at the Recovery Festival, just very, very briefly. And then several months later, I went into work on the Monday morning, and there was a message on my desk, and it says, Russell Brand rang, can you ring him, please? And you sort of go, yeah, okay, can I do that after I've rang David Beckham and obviously David Cameron, so if we can just do it in that order. And actually, I rang Russell back, and we must have spoke for about 2 hours, and I could hear this passion. And I hope you don't mind me saying, I don't do this, the celebrity thing or whatever, and I don't get fazed by people. You know, I was always taught we're all the same. Anybody's different. And my mother used to say to me when I was frightened of this particular doctor I worked with, just imagine him sitting on the toilet with his pants and his trousers down around his ankles. And you'll realise he is no different. But Russell then came over to Burton. We spent a lot of time talking on the phone. He came over to Burton, and he came over as Russell the person, Russell in recovery, Russell with his passion for this agenda and to drive this agenda and to ensure that people out there can and do get well. And I was actually quite, sort of like, wow, I can see this sort of oozing out. He spent, I don't know how long with the clients, but it was a long, long time with the clients. And a lot of our clients, and as you know, you first come in and you're like, do I have to go to AA? Do I have to go to, I don't want to go there. And he sat and spoke to them and inspired them. And they all sat there with their mouths open. And that's what they heard. They heard recovery, they heard motivation, they heard hope for the future. And they were just literally blown away. The things that they have done since then, and I don't think we have some that are graduating tomorrow. We've got quite a few graduating. And they were so inspired, and they wanted me to say that today publicly. They were so inspired, and the impact, Russell, that you had on their recovery and driving them forward. So that is a huge thank you from all those guys that are coming through. I'm going to now hand over to Russell so as he can talk about why he did give it built Give It Up and his fund, and then of course Julie's going to go through. So Russell, over to you, and Brian.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Julie. That was a really lovely introduction. That was lovely that day I spent in Burton. It's an amazing facility. As I said earlier today, I feel most at ease when I'm in sort of, when I'm among other drug addicts and alcoholics. I feel a tremendous sense of ease and acceptance. It's I suppose it's unavoidable that my line of work is the showing off and fame industry, and that is afforded a particular amount of attention and status in the world we live in today, and perhaps we could say broadly to negative effects. So when there's a sort of a opportunity such as this one to have some kind of fleeting positive impact through my notoriety, then I'm really glad of it. But what I find fascinating is that the only community that I've ever really felt actually part of, not outside of, is the community of drug addicts and alcoholics. When I was at school, I didn't feel like I fitted in anywhere. I'm an only child of a single mother, and I didn't feel like I fitted in my family. There's only one other fucking person. It's hard to develop an identity as an outsider under those conditions. Is there suddenly a thumping bass line to proceedings? Or am I losing it? Where's that coming from? Some people have relapsed and set up an alternative conference of decadence. It won't work. I mean, they'll fuck it up. The admin will go wrong once people start using it. Like in rooms like this, where there is a sort of a particular density of drug addicts, this is as good as you're going to get at seeing recovery in action, because the people in this room are you're among lunatics, you're moving among psychopaths now, you're among people who just create chaos at a personal psychological level, at a domestic level, at a familial level, at a criminal level. The people that have a complete capacity for chaos. Talking of myself, hearing those lovely things said about me by Noreen and by Mike and that, and thank you, mate. I'm really proud to work with RAP. Because as I said when I was chatting earlier, I was given that 6 months before you're dead in prison or in a lunatic asylum. Like, you know, for me, I consider it to be just what we say amongst us, like one of the yets. You know, look, for me, there's an air of inevitability around prison. So when I meet people that are doing time or have been away, I think, you know, thanks for doing it for me so that I didn't have to, because I would have got there. You know, because of this disease, I've been relieved of that kind of pious, moral, high-mindedness or judgment, because I know how easy it is to get into those situations. And frankly, the people that I've met that are following abstinence-based recovery principles in prison are among the sort of, I mean, I'm a bit easily duped, to be honest, but they seem so fucking lovely. You sort of think, oh, they're all right. Like really nice, decent people. And you get that in recovery everywhere. People, like, part of, like, this is what's amazing about it, right? Is like we have to help other people in order to stay well. That's an intrinsic principle of it. So everyone's got to be nice for their own selfish reasons. It's a really good way of stimulating the natural egotism and self-centeredness of our age, which is elsewhere constantly inculcated through the propaganda of marketing, through the capitalist system we live in. Here, there's a currency in kindness. People know that we only stay well by helping other people stay well. We can only keep clean ourselves by helping other people keep clean. Now, it's kind of obvious that those principles could be held and could benefit elsewhere in society, and perhaps that's an argument for another day. So, but for here, and for now, all we're talking about doing, and like you've heard the word again and again, articulately presented, brilliantly presented, I thought, by Stuart earlier and that, like this is about building communities, and the more people have access to this message, the more the positivity can be conveyed, the more you're creating that. And what I'm constantly dazzled by, when I hear some of these fucking lunatics talking, I think, thank God I didn't have to deal with that person while they were drinking and using. That's a maniac. And now all they want to do is give you a cuddle and make you a cup of tea and be nice to you and be sweet to you. You're taking people out of the game. It's a kind of spiritual alchemy. Because I know that the reason, look, I don't know about you. A lot of drugs can be a right laugh for a while. But for me, my personal experience of taking drugs was not, I weren't a recreational drug user, not from the get-go. For me, it was medicinal from the first ever time I took drugs. I was unhappy, I was miserable, I felt lost, I felt alone. And if anyone could offer me anything that would deal with that feeling, I'll have it. But when I was a little kid, chocolate biscuits. When I was an adolescent, pornography. When someone come along with drugs, I'll take it, I'll do it. You know, the only thing, in fact, that I was circumspect, doubtful and questioning about was abstinence-based recovery. The one thing that's actually fucking worked. When the dawn finally came, suddenly I was interrogatory, suddenly I was inquisitive, suddenly I had inquiries and questions. It's the one thing that's worked for me, 100%. And the more I commit to it, the more I get back from it. The more I'm willing to help other people, the better I feel. What I reckon, for us people that are drug addicts, alcoholics, whatever, I often consider it, and I know, like, Chip's a double-committed atheist. It's like he's deliberately trying to annoy God, but like on purpose. But I believe in God, and I believe that for that we drug addicts, alcoholics, it's like we've got a spiritual craving, a yearning, and we don't have the language, we don't have the code to express that in our society. But the feeling won't go away, so you've got to nullify it, anesthetize it somehow. I can't live with it. I can't be alive. I can't be alive unless I'm living in kind of love and community with other people. I can't cope with it. My only other option is to take drugs. That's my only other option, because the feelings behind my drug use and my alcoholism, they ain't gone nowhere. I, one day at a time, address those through the principles of the program, of mutual, what is it? We say mutual support systems. Mutual support aid, or whatever the fuck it is, because we've got to be careful. And through talking to other addicts and other alcoholics. Now, it's like they say a lot, don't they? Like, anyone can get clean, you know, and that is actually really hard, because the first time someone mentioned to me, don't try to get to bed tonight without drinking or using, I was like, what? Like, what do you mean it's 7 o'clock? There's too much day left for that amount of consciousness and awakeness. And me now, I don't take drugs. I've not had drugs or alcohol for fucking 8. I mean, I've had some significant amount of coffee, as you can see. Dangerous levels of caffeine, some of which I did take intravenously. The rest through an enema. Conventional coffee use. It's amazing to me. My whole identity, my whole life, my life revolved entirely around getting drugs. I got clean because of Focus 12, the place I got clean, which is built around it's a 12-step. It has 12-step principles at its heart and at its core. And now I stay clean through these, through mutual support, through the fellowship of other addicts, essentially through recovery communities. Now, what we're doing through Comic Relief, which is a charity that I love, which is an integral part of our culture in this country, a beautiful organisation, and I'm proud to be a part of it because we need, like, we're fucking all addicts, aren't we? We're lunatics, we'd fuck it up. We need the administration and support of Comic Relief. So the longevity, the status, the impact makes me, look, that nice logo. You can trust that, Comic Relief. That's as good as a Nike swoosh. There, Comic Relief. We're going to be okay. You know, so like, like we've got support, we've got longevity, we've got a future. Brilliant research has been done. We've got a proper understanding of our problem. Now, all that's needed really is the kind of, I don't know, psychic or spiritual shift that we addicts go through as individuals, a belief that change can be made, that we can share that change with other people. We've just got to spread that belief more broadly. I'm not surprised people are cynical about abstinence-based recovery. It sounds too good to be true. But like, you know, I've been chatting like people on the news and that, and like they don't seem to realise how hard it is for us. Abstinence-based recovery ain't easy. It's not a soft option. It's bloody difficult. It's still now 11 years down the road. It occurs to me constantly, oh, if I could just have a little use to take the edge off. If I could just spend a couple of days on holiday from my head, wrapped in a snug brown blanket of smack, I'd take it. You know, like when I hang around using addicts, I don't think, oh, how lucky I am to have this wonderful hair conditioner and this fancy jacket. I think I'd give my life up for like a blast of brown and white, for a minute on the pipe. You know, like, because it don't go away, that feeling, without diligence and work. And that's why I know we can't be judgmental, we can't be pejorative, we shouldn't be punitive. Like, today is a day about abstinence-based recovery and building abstinence-based recovery communities, and I shouldn't have opinions on outside issues. But my personal opinion on having drugs illegal at this point in history, it's medieval mentality practiced by medieval politicians to punish an entire class of people and to victimize and vilify them. I'm not saying this disease don't affect people all over. Of course it does. We're all subject to it. But you know who suffers from it most. It's been explained over the course of the day. And that's why that policy's in place. It's ridiculous. It's medieval, and it needs to change for us to advance as a planet, to evolve. That's, I think, for me, an important partner of abstinence-based recovery, accepting that the option ain't, oh, are people going to take drugs or not? Of course people are going to fucking take drugs. They take drugs. We're witnessing it. And drug addicts, by the way, don't give a shit if drugs are illegal. It ain't slowing the process down. No one's ever going, oh no! Also, that would provide a handy way to provide revenue for people that want to get clean. Regulated drugs. Regulated drugs, the way that alcohol and tobacco is regulated. I know it makes them look edgy. But that's what I believe. So the personal transformation that I've undergone from being a hopeless, hapless, ridiculous drug addict with no future, no chance, no hope, to being an equal, valid member of this community is perhaps something that we can spread. And from some of the information we've got from some of our excellent speakers today, it seems like that's a possibility. That's why the aims of Give It Up, the aims of the Recovery Group UK, are although they may seem bold, they're highly plausible. By piloting these schemes, we now have the opportunity to see how well these ideas can work away from the hub of the mutual support groups. We can see now it out in the communities. We can see the impact it'll have. It's well positive in Burton. I just had one of their Bakewell tarts. It was delicious. Like, you know, that's their cafe that they've set up in Burton. There's a place in Shoreditch, Paper Cup, it's like a coffee company run by junkies. We're going to need more of these not-for-profit organisations as capitalism fucking collapses anyway. These are the kind of projects that Comic Relief and Give It Up are looking to support. We're going to be raising more money. We've got some money now. Those of you that are looking for advances and grants in that area, we're really, really keen to help you, and we're really keen to learn about your experience, because the fact is we're all in this together. We're all learning from one another. No one's got no superiority. I've learned off every single person that I've spoken to today. It's been fascinating for me. Very proud to be a part of all this. Now I'm going to give over to Comic Relief and I, because they know the actual score. I can just blather on about emotions. Cheers, you lot. I appreciate the time.
Okay, I'm just going to introduce Gilly Green, who is going to tell a lot of you, I hope, the answers to what you have been thinking today as you go back to your communities and wanting to start new projects. Gilly is going to explain the fund. The only thing I will say is that it says on the program that there's going to be a Q&A session straight after she speaks. We feel that that is not the appropriate forum to do it in. If you want to find somebody from Comic Relief during the course of the rest of the afternoon, please go up to them and ask them. If not, obviously, you'll be able to. Gilly will explain how to apply for it. But we're not going to have a Q&A session from the panel. But I'm very pleased now to somebody I've worked with for a while, Gilly Green from Comic Relief.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think Mike mentioned that the cool people spoke in the morning. And also that the men in suits were the afternoon gang. Well, I'm not a man, I'm in half a suit. But I think following Russell as well, I really did get the short straw in terms of where I am. However, what I have got, I hope, is an opportunity to tell you a bit more about the fund, how it came into being, and importantly, what the aspirations are and how you can be part of it. So, okay. So just a little bit of background, really. I think that by now we all know that the fund was established by Russell. We'd have to have been asleep this morning if we hadn't have picked that up. And also that Comic Relief is involved in managing it. And just a little bit of detail about Comic Relief. We've got a long history of making grants and very appreciative of the comments that Russell made. So Russell came to us and approached us about helping him establish the fund. And I mean, very broadly overall, the fund is about promoting abstinence and helping people sustain abstinence-based recovery. And I'm going to talk a bit more about the detail and the aims in a moment. But in terms of how it came about, I think, as I say, Russell approached us because we've got a long history in grant making. But Comic Relief funds across a whole range of different issues, and we're not experts in the world or work around addiction. But there are people who are, and so what we did was we gathered a group of people to work with us who know about these issues to really help us make sure that as we formulated the strategy and how we might run the fund, that it was really informed by the people who work in these issues day in, day out. And we're really grateful to those people that have helped us get to that stage. And when we were setting up that group, Russell asked that the group comprised a majority of people who had personal experience of recovery. And we were very keen to do that, and certainly it chimes very well with Comic Relief's ethos of believing that people who have often been through experiences are the very best people to help advise around the solution. So that worked very well for us and fitted very, very neatly within our ethos. Finally, the fund has to date raised £500,000, and that money is now available for distribution. And as Russell says, we hope that there will be more in the future. So in terms of the aims of the fund, I'm just going to put the 4 aims up on the screen behind me. And I suppose this morning, and in the speeches just now, we've heard a lot about people not getting access to treatment. It's not on people's radar. Acknowledge that may not be for everybody, but everybody absolutely should have a chance to access treatment. We also know that support and aftercare is absolutely vital to help people sustain recovery. We've heard a lot about that this morning. But we know that in many areas that support is either not there or it's very patchy. And so this idea that people need to build social capital and have a range of services around them is very much what's behind the aims of the fund. And so I suppose through the grant making and making a noise around this issue, and I think the combination of Russell's involvement, Comic Relief as a grant maker, and a very skilled group of people, we've got a perfect combination, really, of being able and having a great opportunity to meet some of these aims. And I think it's just worth reinforcing, really, that we're aware that there are an awful lot of definitions around about recovery. But for the Give It Up Fund, we have adopted the Recovery UK definition of recovery, which is up there on the screen. And you can see that very much it comes from an abstinence context. And I think it's just worth saying that the fund will use that definition in terms of the decisions it makes around the grants that it makes. So on to the actual grant making. So we've split the fund into two separate programs. And the first program, as you can see on the screen, is around piloting the development of recovery communities. And I think it's just worth saying a little bit about how we got to this stage. We knew that the aims of the fund were very clear. We'd all agreed that that was what we wanted the fund to try and achieve. But actually how to use this amount of money needed a lot of thought about how we could actually have the maximum impact. We could fund lots of different projects, and that would be a valuable intervention. But if we were really trying to shift something here, if we were really trying to shift a culture and an approach, we felt like we wanted to do something that was more strategic in having and delivering some longer-term outcomes. So the first thing we did was that we undertook a scoping exercise, and we got Stuart to do that, who we heard from this morning, who clearly is very steeped in recovery communities. And what we wanted to try and understand was, what did we know about recovery communities already? What did we know about their effectiveness? And although, and as Stuart said this morning, there is no major research study that has demonstrated those outcomes, what is emerging is there's a set of common characteristics within recovery communities that appear to enable a set of activities and culture to exist that actually enables people to sustain recovery more effectively. And so through that scoping work, we identified the need, which we've heard an awful lot about, and I'm not going to repeat it this morning. We heard about it this morning. I'm not going to repeat it again. But this need for this joined-up support that really helps to integrate people back into the community after treatment, and ensuring that the support and the ongoing support is available, and importantly, that there are positive and visible role models around. And so in thinking then about, well, how best to use the money, how best to, if you like, move forward with our understanding and learning about how we can encourage the development of recovery communities, the steering group decided that it would use some of the money in the fund to actually pilot the development of recovery communities just in 3 areas. And we picked only 3 areas, and they're not defined yet because that will be very much depending on the interest that you have in coming forward with ideas. But we picked just 3 areas because we felt that we needed to invest significantly and sufficiently for people to really take these ideas and find a way of moving them forward. Because this is a new initiative for us, and also because there is obviously the idea of recovery communities we're still learning, we're still growing. We're also very committed to investing in some learning about this as we go through the program. And therefore, some of the money that we will put into that will really enable us to capture the learning about this and ensure that we've got the information that we can then share and share more broadly so that a greater number of people can benefit. Just a little bit behind with my slides. So just a bit more really in how we're going to run the fund, and also importantly what you need to know about what we're going to look for in applications to this part of the fund. I think what we recognise is that people are at very different stages. There are some areas where there are lots of different organisations involved. There are examples of treatment centres that have got a really good wraparound service around them. And there are other areas that are still operating perhaps more without that sort of support. And so our starting point really is that we want to encourage people to start having conversations locally about how and if you want to apply to give it up, to start to move towards developing more of a recovery community around the services that you provide. And I suppose the first thing that we'll be looking for then really is that there is a clear and a shared vision about what it is, where you want to get to within your local area, and that you need to be able to articulate that in the applications that you make to us. What does it look like? Where are you now, and where do you want to be? We also know that actually where there are high levels of engagement from people with personal experience who are in recovery, that those services are, they benefit hugely from that engagement. And so in any program that we support, we absolutely want to see people with recovery in the centre of these developments and very central, and the voice of those people is heard loud and clear. The third thing really is that there is a strong and demonstrable track record of supporting people to achieve and sustain abstinence. We're looking for organisations and services that can show that they are working effectively. And also, in terms of effectiveness, that local partnership. I think we've heard many, many times today about the need for, we can't do this alone, services can't work on their own. This needs to be a community approach, it needs to be a joined-up approach. And so we'll be looking for effective local partnerships. And finally, I suppose the buy-in from everybody locally and a real evidence that there is a commitment that people want to move towards a recovery model and to develop recovery communities. Just a few practical bits of information about this part of the programme. The first is that we anticipate grants of we've set up to 70,000 a year over 2 years in each area. And I think that the level of this funding is about, we're not being prescriptive about how this funding might be used. We want to be flexible. We want this development to be owned by you within your local communities. It's about you telling us what you need to get from where you are now towards building a recovery community. So some of that money might be to bring in additional resources to help coordinate activity. Some of it may be for a small local pot that you may locally distribute to support people in recovery. There may be all sorts of different ways in which you want to use that money. But it's up to you to tell us. What we're saying is we've got a set amount of money, but you tell us how you can use it to help achieve the aims of the fund and the development of your own communities. There are some costs. I mean, having said it, we will certainly look at a flexible use of the funding. There are some costs that we wouldn't want to include. And I think, for example, just funding individual treatment, whilst there may well be obviously a need for that, it doesn't feel like it's a use of the fund that would lead to that long-term learning and sustainable change. And if we're really trying to work towards a cultural shift in how we approach recovery locally, then it feels important that the money for this bit of the fund is very much about helping that shift and that movement. The second part of the fund is a small grants programme. And this is very much, I think, and this picks up on the number of things that we've heard already this morning, some of the questions this morning. Where is the support for people, particularly for people in recovery, who've got great ideas, who've got lots of creativity, energy, enthusiasm, and want to do something? And whether that's through developing recovery champion network, whether it's about setting up social enterprise, whether it's about the different types of social and recreational activities. We feel it's really important that some of this money is used to really back and invest in those people, to really help people take forward some of their ideas. And we've heard also a lot about the need for people to feel that they are able to contribute, they're back involved within their communities, and it feels like offering relatively small amount of money for people to do these things is a really important contribution that the Give It Up Fund can make. So there will be grants of up to £5,000 available to help sustain recovery, and also, importantly, to try and work on reducing stigma, and a lot of that will come from the visibility of people in recovery making this active and positive contribution. There's some examples of the types of things that the fund will support. And as I think I said before, we would expect many of these grants to go to people who themselves are in recovery. So just really to finish up, a bit of practical detail. For the first fund, the piloting the recovery communities, we've got a closing date of the 25th of April. And that will be a two-stage process where we'll receive our bids, and then we'll invite a number of those to come and make some presentations to the panel, which will be made up of the steering group. And decisions will then be made to award at that point 3 investments. The Small Grants Fund, there are 2 closing dates, and it's just a one-stage process. And I would absolutely stress that for the Small Grants Fund, we've tried to make the application form really simple, and it's simply sort of saying to people, tell us about your idea and what difference you think it's going to make. And so we've tried to ensure that there isn't a barrier in that application process that would stop people feeling that this was for them. I think that's all really I wanted to say at this point. I've noticed that the website address up there is missing the .com, but if you pick up information from the exhibition, there's some leaflets about both bits of the fund. There's quite a few Comic Relief staff here today, and everybody would be very happy to talk to you individually, answer questions, and provide any more details that you want. So thank you very much, and we really, really look forward to hoping that we've enthused you with the idea of this fund, and that we receive lots of interesting bids from you. So thanks a lot.
I don't think the heating was in our budget for today. I think it's freezing in here, so I've got my coat on. Just a quick note before I introduce, think about how many times have you been to a conference here in the UK that's just about abstinence? And more importantly, how many times have you been to a conference where they say, this money is about abstinence? It hasn't happened. It's the first, but we need to make sure it does keep happening. You can get that information off the RG UK website, and you can also join the RG UK. It is free, and you can get the form and just download it, fill it in off RG UK website. I just wanted to say something that to people. I think it's quite rude when people keep wandering in and out when people are talking. You know, there's been a lot of effort to get this conference, to get this off the ground, and work very, very hard. So I would ask people to be respectful, because there's a lot of wandering in and out, and I think it is quite rude. We've got a coffee break coming up soon, and we've got some really good speakers. So I would ask you to respect that while we're in here, not to be wandering in and out, unless you've got a very poor bladder. Right, I want to introduce Christian Guy. Christian Guy is the Managing Director of the Centre for Social Justice. I don't know whether any of you read Breakthrough Britain 1 or the recent media coverage on No Quick Fix. Massive research on why abstinence should be on the agenda, massive research of what's happening within the addiction field, and that addiction is a social justice issue, and it cuts across the 5 areas of social justice. I chair the Addictions Working Group. Chip sits on the Addictions Working Group with Russell, who is the researcher, and also Lisa Breyer's Cowboy Films. Some really interesting work that has been happening. Keep your eyes out, but look at No Quick Fix. So I'm going to introduce Christian Guy from such a fantastic organisation and huge supporters. They give us the research and the evidence to be able to put abstinence on the agenda. Christian, a warm welcome.
Noreen, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's very humbling. I was thinking earlier, if there are 100 people with 10 years of experience of recovery, that's about 1,000 years just in this room. And there are probably at least 1,000 years worth of things to capture here. So it's really humbling to be here. As director of the Centre for Social Justice, which is an organisation working in British politics to look at the root causes, I suppose, of disadvantage. I've been working with Noreen for a number of years, or working for Noreen, really. As it works out in reality, she's absolutely terrifying and amazing. And it's a great pleasure also to be involved with the Give It Up process on the committee for that campaign, and I'm delighted to support it. I'm just going to offer a few reflections, really. I probably won't tell you anything you don't already know, because, as I say, the expertise in this room is remarkable. But I think my message is a simple one, and that is that rehabilitation is about social justice, and for as long as rehabilitation remains the preserve of the rich or a chosen few, then we should not rest. If the term social justice means anything to people who use it, then surely it has to mean that the poorest or the most vulnerable people in this country have the same opportunities as people with wealth. Yet, as we know, for too long, the debate about full recovery has overlooked that angle. Something that should be really quite simple and non-controversial has become a bit divisive, a bit ideological. We've attacked and undermined different sides of the argument. We've gone from one extreme to another. And in the process, we've really let the most important people down. And in that sense, I think of a man I met in Manchester about 2 years ago, visiting a brilliant project in the city. And he came in, he was held up by his brother because he couldn't really walk otherwise. He was probably in his 40s. He looked a lot older than that. And his brother brought him in, and he was well known to the centre. His eyes were open, but I don't think he could see much. He was really gone with heroin, alcohol, and a cocktail of probably goodness knows what else. And this is a man who I looked at, and I've met so many people in that position before, but for some reason I just took a look at him and thought, how have we let you get to this place? And I've just got a 5-week-old son, and now I look at my son today and I think, your future's unwritten. And yet I met a man in Manchester whose life was so bleak, and that doesn't seem at all fair. It could be the guy I heard about through a friend in a police cell overnight who was pleading for a chance to get free of his addiction, and the drugs worker had to tell him that there was nothing really locally for him. There are countless other stories like that. So at the heart of today, really, should be something we can all agree on. Whether we're from the left or the right, whether we believe in legalization or tough sanctions, whether we think it's a decision or a disease, we should all agree that people should be given the choice to get free and stay free, or to give it up. And I think what we've heard today is really encouraging, and it seems like we are moving now to that place of consensus. But in terms of a few reflections, I thought I would highlight some areas where I think there is more work to be done. The first is perhaps politically. As much as we would like to pretend otherwise, politics does matter. you'll be aware, many of you, that a general election is on the way. And if you weren't aware of that, I apologize for having to draw that to your attention. It's about 60 months away. You've still got time to leave the country if you need to. But what we're seeing already is that this is becoming a race for the middle classes. Who can get to the middle classes quickest? Look at the debate. Energy prices, living standards, home ownership, childcare, social care, tax cuts. Even Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, a self-declared socialist, is in the Daily Telegraph this week saying only he can save the middle classes now. But today, I think predominantly what's exciting is we're here to focus on something different. We're not chasing votes. We are considering a group of people often on the margins. And they don't tend to feature much in the debates politically, and that's a great shame. So we should recognise today that yes, we're here to build each other up, to encourage that, to celebrate, give it up. But we're also here because we need to make a statement. We need to make a statement that these groups of people, the people we care for and the people we are, really matter too. And at the CSJ, we're working with Noreen really closely to get all over the UK to find projects that we can present to politicians to show them how it can be done and what a second chance society might look like. And I would love to hear from any of you. Rupert's here from the CSJ, Noreen too, any of you that would like to come with us as that process unravels. So politics matters, but also practicalities matter. Progress has been made, there is no doubt about that. Recovery is now a mainstream concept, which is incredibly exciting because even just a few years ago, it was not mainstream in the debate that goes on in this place and around it. And we've witnessed some incredibly exciting progress in terms of treatment and recovery. Recovery champions, completely brilliant, comprehensive pathways now that people go through. But we also need to recognize that we've still got about 300,000 people, and you'll know these statistics, who are opiate and or crack users in England, about a city the size of Coventry. And within the treatment system, almost 30,000 people last year were discharged as free from dependency, but we know a great deal of them are actually still using. And if you look at the data, you see that actually only a small proportion of those who leave treatment actually leave truly drug-free. That should keep us awake at nights. In the current financial climate, of course, it is tougher, because actually giving people a chance is actually about money and resources. And despite significant political commitment, and I think we should recognize that, there are ministers in government now who really have backed this agenda for recovery. We know from research we've done at the CSJ that more than half of local authorities have cut money for residential rehabilitation since 2010, and we all know about supporting people budgets and how they're being slashed. There's one charity we've come across recently at the CSJ who have gone from 44 substance abuse workers to 4 in just the last 5 years. Many of you will be living with those pressures too, I know. But it's not just about money. Another reflection I would offer is that actually, and we've heard it a bit today, there is still a lack of ambition for too many people in the system. Many important people who need to believe in recovery remain skeptical of it, maybe because they haven't seen it, and that's perfectly reasonable. But today we need to recommit to making the argument, to winning the argument for rehab with evidence, with data, with experience. And there is really good evidence for abstinence. We've seen some of it today. We know that there are longitudinal studies that prove it. We see projects like Noreen's and all of you who are represented today proving every day that this is not some theoretical dream we're trying to sell. It's working in the toughest parts of the UK with people who need that chance. And the really exciting thing about what it means to pursue recovery is that this is an entirely comprehensive package. It's not just about dealing with the immediate issue. It's relationships, skills, attitudes, parenting, budgeting, housing. It's the entire social justice package. And we need to be clear about that because there is social value, but there's also great economic value that we need to be presenting to people in the Treasury, people looking at what this government spends. We need to be able to make the economic arguments too, and that's partly what we're trying to do at the CSJ. It's about second chance for individuals and savings for the taxpayer, and that's crucial at the moment. So we know it works. Even today we've heard about it. It's absolutely remarkable. And I never get tired of hearing the stories of change. But I want to take an opportunity just briefly to highlight perhaps two things I think we need to reflect on today for Give It Up, but also for the general future as we look at the country. And this isn't about being all doom and gloom. That's the opposite of what today should be about. But I think there are important things to keep in mind. One, the aging nature of many who need help. I think Rosanna touched on it earlier, but a third of people currently in the treatment system are 40 or over. And another third, some of them of course in the same group, have been on a continuous prescription for about 4 years or more. Given that the average age of someone in treatment in England is 35, we need to work out what recovery looks like into later life. And we need to do it quickly, because despite the treatment budgets being spent, a lot of people in that age bracket aren't getting a chance to become free. Many are being kept alive and stable by really valid harm reduction measures, but they do remain trapped in addiction. A lot of them still unemployed, committing crime, lost from friends and family. This group is in danger of being forgotten, or worse, written off. We've heard at the CSJ of officials who have told us that basically the heroin-using population is aging, and the best we can hope for is managed decline. Their health needs are too severe, they say. Their using is too entrenched, so we need to just make life as comfortable as possible until the inevitable reality takes place. In other words, keep them quiet, out of sight, perhaps put them in shooting galleries where the rest of us can't see them. But we know we can do better than that. You prove it every day. And only last month we heard about a man who'd been using for 3 decades. He'd been on the streets for 30 years. He'd seen his girlfriend die on the streets with him. He'd had contact and he'd spiraled in and out of treatment until he went to one place. And for the first time, for several months, with strong aftercare, a really strong abstinence ethos, mutual aid, he began his recovery. And today, despite 30 years of using, he runs his own business and he plays an incredibly important part in the life of his community. So the aging nature of people in the treatment system, something to reflect on. The second thing I want to share briefly is alcohol, because a much larger group of people are trapped in that addiction. 1.6 million people in England trapped by it. Alcohol-related deaths have doubled since 1991. Liver disease is now one of the big 5 killers in this country, and it's the only one on the increase. Serious drinking is up. Alcohol-related admissions to hospital have doubled in a decade and continue to go up. In terms of treatment, increasing hospital readmissions show that this is not quite working. Although people receive treatment for the symptoms, we're not yet good enough at dealing with the root causes. There are more people in drug treatment than alcohol treatment, despite the disparity in terms of numbers. And specialists tell us they see people time and again with cirrhosis being put in controlled drinking programs. I think we can be more ambitious than that. So, the political and practical direction for drug and alcohol treatment and recovery in this country is far from settled. More people are talking about recovery. More people are pursuing it, which is to be welcomed with all of our hearts. And you see events like today, which are just incredibly inspiring. But we also know that our work is a long way from done. Why can't every person have the choice we would want for our friends and family? The choice to get free and the chance to stay free. At the moment, I would argue, rehab still remains the preserve of the better off or the chosen few in the system today. Too few people desperate for a choice don't get one. They're parked on alternatives for years. Managed, yes. Stable, yes, but not free. A friend of mine who knows exactly what it means to plunge to the depths and then rebuild his life describes rehabilitation as a chance to live again. A chance to live again. Surely that is what recovery is all about. We know it works. So today, let's celebrate the successes. Let's learn from each other and take stock and welcome Give It Up. But tomorrow, for the sake of those we all care about so much, let's go out with renewed determination to finish the job and give people that second chance. Thank you.
Before I ask the next speaker to come, there's a slight adjustment to the programme. We have 2 speakers now, and then what I would hope would be a very quick tea break. Just go and get a cup of tea, come back again. Because then we have Camilla Batman-Galich from Kids Company, who's going to be talking just before the last Q&A session of the afternoon. But I'm pleased now to introduce somebody from the Amy Winehouse Foundation who have helped certainly us, and I know they are trying to help as many people as possible in as many different ways as possible. And I'm pleased to announce that Dominic Ruffy from the Amy Winehouse Foundation is going to speak.
Well, I'm not in a suit, so that's a good start. I'm here today to talk to you about a few things, really. I work for the Amy Winehouse Foundation. I'm in recovery for 3 years. I'm also the voluntary chair of a service user group called Rehab Grads. And I'd like to talk about all those things, but I'm on a stage, there's lights, there's cameras, and I just want to talk about me. Do you know what I mean? My ego appeals to that kind of stuff. But I'll try not to. My journey in recovery began by going through rehab. I'm probably one of the guys that Christian just spoke of. I went through treatment 3 times. Every time it was funded by my family. And I did a lot of using, and I saw a lot of people die during my 25 years of being out there who would never get the chance that I had to get well. And when I came out of treatment, and I was in there 42 weeks the last time around, and I'd accessed all the things that have been spoken about here today. I accessed safe recovery housing. I was presented with volunteering opportunities. I was given a chance to reintegrate into society in a structured way. And I'm here today 3 years sober, and I really value that part of my recovery journey, the time I spent in rehab. And I just thought it was shocking when I came out that there were these people that I knew that had died, that had far worse lives than I ever had, who weren't given the same chance. And around about the same time, I got invited to a meeting where there were loads of rehab owners, and they wanted to work out a way of engaging with the system, if you like, to try and increase their referrals. In that year that I'd spent in rehab, I think about 20 rehabs had shut around the country because of decommissioning and lack of money and all this stuff. And yet the money is in the treatment system to pay for it. Make no mistake about that, it is there. When you look at the maths, it is there. We've talked a little bit about the fact that people don't see recovery and people are sceptical about it. And between me and a group of a few other people, we came to the conclusion that unless we're actually back in those services, unless we're going back into that community provider who prescribed me methadone for 4 years and saying, actually, listen, I went through treatment, I'm in abstinence recovery, and I'm well, what do you think? If they don't see that, then how are you going to change their minds? How are you going to hope to change the system where you've got prescribing nurses who have done a job for 20 years, they've been told they've been doing it very well, they're probably really proud of what they've done because that's what they are asked to do, and they've kept people in the system. Unless you go and sit in front of those same people and say, actually, there is a different way, you're not going to get anywhere. There's no point turning up and saying, you know what, you're the devil, you're shit, you've been killing people. Because that, you know, who's going to respond to that? You've got to go in there and be quite appeasing, really, but be an active example of recovery. So that's what the Rehab Grads Network, which we set up, decided to do, and our experiences have been really good. We've got very active groups in Norwich, St Helens, Bury St Edmunds with Chip's crew at Focus 12, in Scarborough, and all over Scotland. And in all of those areas, referrals to rehab have increased. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, the service workers understand a little bit more about it, but also the service users who have been told for years that the best they can hope for is to sit on a script. They get to meet something different. And again, unless those guys and girls meet people in recovery, what have they got to aim for? Why should they reach for abstinence if they're being told that 40 mils of meth and 30 mil of diazepam is a good day, and come along to a group and play football afterwards? I wouldn't change if I was told that was okay. I wouldn't strive for something more if I could get away with it. And there are services out there where that goes on all day long, and it's not right. During the course of that work, I was very fortunate. was doing a presentation at the House of Commons, and Mitch and Jane Winehouse were there, and they approached me afterwards, and we began talking, and they explained some of the aims of the foundation, obviously with Amy's passing and all her experiences, and Mitch and Jane's experiences during those latter years of visiting various rehabs. They had a real passion for wanting to help people in recovery, and ultimately it led to me doing some volunteering there and getting a job there, and they've put up with a controlling, devious, manipulative egomaniac who likes to do everything around him and control them as best he can, and on occasion lose his temper. And they've embraced that, to be fair, and it says a lot for the people at the foundation as to why they're then motivated to help other organisations who seek to help people in recovery. So we do a few things there. We are a grant-making organisation. We do make grants to projects that have a recovery focus. There's one guy sat in front of me, David Hyam, at the Well in Lancaster, who we've helped out, and he does some fabulous work up there with a kind of community-based mutual aid facilitation centre, and a variety of other projects too. But we also have a schools programme which we're very proud to have developed in partnership with AdAction, a community provider, and I will say here that I thoroughly believe in collaboration. I don't see the point in trying to sit outside of a treatment system when we are part of that treatment system. So we can talk about rehab being a preserve of the wealthy, but it's always going to be that if it chooses to sit outside a treatment system. And we have that ethos at the foundation too, so we seek to collaborate with anybody that we feel is trying to make a difference, really. So we created this program with AdAction. It's called the Resilience Program, and it's about people like me going into schools, talking about some of the consequences of addiction, but primarily talking about all the underlying issues that were going on before we ever picked up a drink or a drug. So that can be anything from dishonesty to self-harm to poor body image, low self-esteem, all those things that I certainly experienced when I was 10, 11, 12 years old that led to me being susceptible to substance misuse. That's what we go and talk to the kids about. As of the 1st of April this year, we'll be in 45 schools across the country, and within the next 5 years, we will see 250,000 students. The whole thing's being evaluated by Harvard University to prove that the students do value life experience being brought into their school. They say they do, but there's no evidence base for it, so we're going to create that evidence base. And the other big part of the program is, and again, this says a lot about Mitch Winehouse, because he was very red hot on this from the day we decided to do it, was a twofold thing. Yes, it's about educating kids and trying to prevent some of those young people ending up like I did. But it's also about working with people in recovery and creating opportunities for people who are in recovery and helping people sustain their own personal recovery journeys. So currently at the foundation, of the 6 staff, 60% of our staff are in recovery, and that's going to grow because we're about to go and hire about 8 more people in recovery to go into the schools. We currently work with around about 50 volunteers around the UK. That's going to grow to a much greater number as we get into more schools. There's all sorts of training involved and what have you, and it all serves to prove that, certainly from my point of view and from the people that we work with, unless you have these opportunities around you, unless you have the kind of support around you that helps build your self-esteem, I think somebody touched on it earlier, that if it's not on the inside, you can stick me in and I know, I used to work in this city, I lived in a lovely house, I had X, Y, Z, it didn't matter a thing, do you know what I mean? It did not stop me ending up homeless with a chronic heroin habit. Now that material stuff meant nothing until I changed what was going on in here. Do you know what I mean? And we really believe that at the foundation, and we hope that we are seen as a supportive organisation, and we hope that the programme we've developed for the schools really helps the kids, but also really helps a few people build a life post their addiction. The other stuff that we do at the foundation, we work very closely with organisations like the Big Lottery. We've been involved in their multiple complex needs investment programme, helping them kind of shape how they should engage with people like me and people who are currently in services to have better treatment systems. We've been very fortunate to be invited onto the steering committee for the Give It Up fund of money, which is really exciting and amazing, because I'm all about abstinence. That's what I believe in, and it's a real pleasure to be able to know that we can help guide where some money might go to help people build sustainable communities. We also do quite a lot of work with Noreen and Chip and all those guys and girls in central government, trying to change the minds and hearts of the politicians and to take recovery to them, really. So we have a whole range of stuff that we do, and I've got some friends in the audience who are very keen that I mention them whilst I'm stood up here, because it's not all about me and my ego. So there's James McDermott from Riot over there, who I'm sure many of you know. He's a very good guy. I've already mentioned David from The Well. And about 3 months ago, us three and about 8 other people came together. We were all looking at the various work we'd done in our recoveries, and we created the Advisory Council for Sustainable Recovery, which essentially is a knowledge base of projects around the country that community services or any treatment provider can tap into to say, all right, so how did you build what you built? How did you get a service user group with 3,000 members around the country? Why does Riot in Staffordshire work so well? Why has The Well in Lancaster got 60 to 80 people turning up every Saturday, regardless of where they're at in their recovery, regardless of what money they've got in their pocket? They turn up and they have a good time and they go home and they don't use. And why does that stuff work? So there's a whole world of stuff that we do, really. I'm not going to bore you anymore. I think it's an amazing thing to be here. I feel very blessed to be involved in it all, and I hope you all end up feeling very blessed about being able to access some of this cash to make some of your dreams come true, because you've only got to think it. The money's now here, so come and apply it and make it happen. All right, thank you.
I was trying to think of the music to Coronation Street and I can't think of it. There is one song I've thought of though. There ain't no stopping us now, we're on the move. So I wanted to sing that one. Our next guest I don't think needs any introduction. Mr. Kevin Kennedy, who was on, some of you may have seen him on Good Morning, and being the bugger that I am and not missing any opportunity, I was straight on the internet, straight on the phone, and I got Claire Kennedy, and straight in saying, loved what you had to say, you know, this is what we're doing, would love you to be part of it and to be part of this RG UK Give It Up today, and really enthusiastic to have it. So I am delighted to introduce Mr. Kevin Kennedy, aka Curly Watts.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kevin Kennedy, and I am a great big alcoholic and an addict. I'm also an actor on the television and on the theatre. And if you're on the television or the theatre, you have a script and there's a character to hide behind. Today, I haven't. What you see before you is what you get, and I'm terrified. I didn't know what to do. I thought I'll read some bits out of my book, and I thought, no, that's naff. So I thought I'll write a few notes. So I wrote a few notes, and the first note says, run away. As I say, I'm an alcoholic. I don't know why I became an alcoholic. When I was a kid, I didn't think, when I grow up, I want to be an alcoholic. I never thought that for a minute. I was first introduced to a pub when my gran was a cleaner in a pub, and one day she had to look after me before I went to school, and it was the first time I'd ever been in a pub. And as soon as I got inside it, it was like Aladdin's cave to me. I remember thinking, what goes on in here? Because there was brass and carpets and long bars and the smell, and I was immediately attracted to it, and I was thinking, I cannot wait until I'm old enough to get in here and find out what happens. And as soon as I was old enough, I was in there. When I went to further education, or drama school, I think like most educational establishments, not only do you learn what may be your future career, but you learn how to drink as well. And when you finish that particular 3 years at university or whatever, then you seem to calm down a bit and get on with your life. But I didn't. I just kept going. Because my drug of choice was more. More chocolates, more cars, more beer, more drugs, anything I could get my hands on. Eventually, to cut a long story short, I got into Coronation Street. And as my acting career started to rise, so did my drinking. A lot of people have asked me, especially in the media for some reason, was it the fame that sent you to the drink? And I have to say no. I drank because I liked it. It's as simple as that. Did they disbelieve you? Go, no, it must have been the pressures of being famous. I said, no. I drank because I liked it. I enjoyed the pub. I enjoyed the camaraderie in the pub. I enjoyed the whole atmosphere of the pub. It was a great place. You could get the latest jokes. You could get advice on medical advice. You could get legal advice, marital advice. The best. I just loved the pub. But it all went wrong for me about 1998. I thought actually about 1997 I discovered the secret of the universe, and that was the morning drink. By accident, I was making it. I was really rough one morning, and I was shaking and sweating, and I'm sure you all know about that. And I found some rum, and I put some rum in the tea, and I drank it, or the coffee, and I drank it, and everything calmed down. And I was like, why didn't I think of this before? This is genius. And that's how my drinking really got to extremes. I have to look at my notes now, look. We did we all, I think, have done some stuff in the past that we've been ashamed about, and this is a shame-based illness. I think that's part of the problem, but I also think the only way out of this illness is abstinence. That's what I was taught when I went to various rehabs. Turning Point was one of them, which are here today. And then I came out of there and I started drinking again. And then eventually I ended up in the Priory. I did my 28 days in the Priory. And that was really just the beginning. And then I had 6 months. I was out of work for 6 months. Granada, who are very future-seeing in this, they decided to send me to rehab instead of sacking me. And that was the American way, and I think it's one thing we do need from the Americans is the way they look forward and the way they deal with alcoholism and drug addiction in the future. So for the first 6 months, all I did was go to meetings. I used to do 4 meetings a week. One on a Wednesday, but if Manchester City were at home, then I'd miss that meeting and I'd go to one on a Thursday. And that's all I did. And as I say, it was just the beginning. I didn't like the meetings. I thought they were very nice people, and I'm really sorry for them, but I don't belong here because I'm famous. And of course, the only reason I'm here, of course, is because I'm being watched by the press. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And my ego kept me in the meetings. So an ego can be a very positive thing to have if it's used in the right way. But my total world was I'm being watched, so I really don't need to be here. But I feel sorry for you, but I'll just sit here. And it was a really horrible scout hut in Altrincham in Manchester. And over the months, I learnt to love this scout hut. I would never be seen dead in this scout hut before, but I learned to love it because it was horrible and it was dusty, but it was keeping me well. And by a form of osmosis almost, the message began to seep through, and I suddenly realised what recovery was all about. So I've been sober now 16 years, and thank you. And I think what you have to remember is I didn't do it on my own. Thank you for the applause, I love it, but I didn't do it on my own. I had a lot of help. 12 years ago, Claire and I, my wife, we were looking for a meeting. We're in Florida, and we were looking for a meeting. And we found this place. It looked like a rum shack from the outside. So being recovering alcoholics, we went straight in. And what we found in there was amazing. The room was split into two. They had AA on one side and I think Cocaine Anonymous on the other side. And it was like a community in there. And I thought, this is a brilliant idea. Because like all brilliant ideas, I did nothing about it until about 2 weeks ago. When I suddenly thought we need one of these dry bars. I don't particularly like the phrase dry bar, but it'll do for now. And I'm lucky enough to live in Brighton, and I can't think of a better place for it because not picking on Brighton, but Brighton does have an alcohol problem and drug problem, but it's also full of artists and actors and writers and poets, and I'd like to utilise all those people, and some of them are in recovery, and what a better way to show off your recovery than to go to this place and show that you are in recovery. I think the time is changing now. I think we have to make recovery more visible. People think when you talk about AA, people go, oh, I don't know about that. It's all a bit secretive. I mean, it's not secretive. I mean, you just have to drive around any major town and look for 20 people chain smoking outside some church hall, and it's pretty sure you've found some sort of meeting there. And it's time to demystify it. There are millions of people in this country who are in recovery, and I think the time has come to stand up and say, yes, I am the CEO of this big building. Yes, I'm an airline pilot. Yes, I am a dentist. Yes, I am this, that, and the other, and I'm in recovery. And I think it's important that we change people's view on what recovery is about. And that is why I wanted to start this dry bar. And I've just been listening to the people around there, and everyone's asking for funding. Now, I think that's very encouraging, because it means that we're all together trying to find a solution to this problem, because it is a problem. It's like the Black Death, it's our plague. And if we don't do something about it now, then it's going to get more and more serious. I think we may have lost a generation. I think we might have to wave goodbye to that generation. But if we start now, I have children. I'm sure many of you here have children. Maybe we should do it for them, because this is the future. It's our future and it's their future. And I know you're dying for a cup of tea. So thank you very much for listening to me.
I would like to start first by introducing the Secretary of State, Ian Duncan-Smith MP, and I think I said before the coffee break, there will never ever be, I don't think, a minister that supports this, that drives in government the message of abstinence, together with Philippa Stroud. I don't know where she's gone. Where's Philippa? Philippa Stroud over there, who is Ian's right arm. Amazing drivers, and believe me, they get into some tussles and some arguments. If any of you have read, and I hope most of you had, Putting Full Recovery First, the key driver, Philippa Stroud, again. So there is a warm welcome for the Secretary of State's Ian Duncan-Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, Noreen, thank you very much indeed. Forgive me, I'm suffering from the tail end. For you men, flu. For you women, a light cold. I'll stay with my man flu, if you don't mind. It feels pretty grotty. Anyway, it's a huge pleasure to be here. It's a big pleasure to be here because of Noreen, Camilla sitting up there, two great icons in my life, both who've been telling me what to do now for the last 10 years. And I, like a good man, have been doing exactly what I'm told, even when I'm in government. That's the important feature. The thing I want to say about this, though, being here today is really, really important. As Noreen was saying, a conference in which now there's money for recovery, and I congratulate Comic Relief for that. It's really brilliant. And what we're trying to do in government is to change the whole direction of travel so that we recognize the key issue, which is that if somebody has a drug problem, then we shouldn't want just to see them no longer be a problem for the police, which seemed to have been in the past to have been so much what the plan was, which as long as they weren't causing problems in that area, then it was kind of okay. And you tick the box marked treatment. What we want to do is move that to a point, which is what we're trying to do now, so that actually, if you have a drugs problem, you're on a journey. And the journey is from that dependency through to independence. That's the key. And it isn't always going to happen in one go, or 2 goes, or 3 goes. You know, life is about second chances, because that's exactly what it is. And for people who've had addiction problems, they will know that this is about second and third and fourth chances, because it isn't an easy road. It's a very difficult road, and I recognize that. And there's not, I suspect, anybody really in the UK who doesn't have a family, someone in that family who hasn't had a similar problem. So we all speak a little bit from personal experience, and we also speak sometimes from experience gained from others. And that's really where I want to land the comments that I'm making today, which is therefore the government is absolutely determined, we are determined, Philip and myself and Oliver Letwin and others, working to make sure that we bed in the idea that drugs treatment is about recovery, getting people free from drugs as far as we possibly can, getting a new life, playing a full part in society again. And that's really drawn from the day I turned up at Noreen's place, and at the CSJ, Centre for Social Justice, we had written a paper on drugs and on rehab, and we were convinced already at the centre that this was the right direction of travel for government to go in, for society to be in. But I could never really picture in my mind what that looked like. It's very difficult sometimes. You know, when you're thinking about really early intervention and saving lives that are most troubled, you know, young kids in difficulty with gangs, you know, if you visit Camilla's organisation, you get a picture of what that looks like. And you need to have a picture. And with recovery from drugs, I arrived at Noreen's place one day, not having really planned to be there, and wasn't sure whether it was the right thing to do to spend that much time just looking at one centre. I spent the whole day there with her, and I picked up the telephone as I left, and I rang Oliver Letwin, and I said to him, Oliver, I have seen our future drug treatment. You must come up here and see it too, because I know now it works. And that was the effect that Noreen's centre had on me. Because it is exactly that. It is all about giving people with that addiction an opportunity and a chance, but with the discipline and determination to move people through that journey to full recovery. And that is why beating the scourge of drugs is more importantly about saving lives than anything else. This is a health issue at the end of the day. It's about people's lives. And as long as we see it in the terms of the quality of life, then we will always rest ourselves back with the idea of rescuing people rather than confining them. And that seems to me to be the process. You'll save more money at the end of the day if people no longer take drugs and if they're out there working, doing their best and making the most of their natural abilities. So I want to congratulate all of you who have a much greater track record in this than I could ever have. Thank you very much indeed for all the hard work that you've all done. Thank Comic Relief for the fantastic support that you've given. And most of all, thank those of you who've been involved in this drug area, Camilla and others, and particularly in this case, Noreen at Back O'Connor, for the fantastic and inspirational work that you provide for very ordinary people like myself to one day come along through luck and be in a position, maybe, just maybe, to help get this policy right. So we'll try and do this. I think we're going to get there. It's taken longer than I thought, but I think we'll still get there at the end of the day. And if just one life is saved by that, then I think we'll have been a success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I was really pleased to hear you say about second and third chances. I think we're very hard on expecting addicts or people with addiction problems to get clean first time. 65% of people fail their driving test the first time, but we don't ban them from driving for the rest of their lives. So thank you for that and your support. I am now tasked with the mouthful of introducing Camilla Batmangelic, who's from Kids Company. Please come on the stage.
Thank you very much. You might notice that I'm not in your program because the reason I ended up here today is Russell Brand visited us. and insisted in his lovely way that I turn up and say something for 10 minutes. So I'm here to share a thought with you for 10 minutes, but could I ask you not to take any pictures while I'm talking, because the flash makes me forget what I'm saying. You can take pictures afterwards. So 10 minutes, what do I want to share with you? Kids Company supports some 36,000 children, young people, and vulnerable adults every year. 81% of the children who come to our street-level centres arrive addicted to substances. And 90% of them describe their immediate carers, parents, and family as introducing them to drugs. We have very, very young children below the age of 9 who are independently taking substances, and prior to that, often children are in situations where the parent is giving them substances to calm them down. What I would like us to think about is the importance of the recovery program, and also perhaps arriving at the essence of what recovery is really about. Why does it work and what is it? And I come at this with an enormous sense of respect for people in this room who have day in, day out worked with sometimes individuals who have had significant disturbances, emotional and behavioral, and you, above all else, have stuck with them through their challenges, sometimes in residential settings, which cannot be easy 24 hours a day. But I do think that nationally, we lack clinical narrative that is robust and well thought through. We tend to think about recovery across the whole spectrum of vulnerable children, vulnerable adults, addictions, psychiatric disorders, and so on, in kind of siloed ways, as if someone has schizophrenia, someone has addiction, and often actually people's difficulties are complex, multiple, and they have continuous challenges as they go through their various recovery programs. So what we need, in effect, nationally, is some kind of thought leadership around what does vulnerability look like along a spectrum, and also how do we do recovery in a way that is sustained, is not gimmicky, is not about saving short-term money and not really getting the genuine results. And there is significant threat ahead of us, because the social impact bond world could potentially actually damage long-term work, because the narrative of what makes an effective outcome is at the moment being dictated by the business world. And we, because most of us don't have money, are tending to behave in a rather servile way and try and fit our services around what people who have money want us to do. Whereas actually we should flip it on its side, and we should actually come up with the clinical narrative that works, and then insist that the financial world works around us. So therefore, if we are going to do this, then we need a framework, a kind of hanger on which to kind of hang our theoretical models. And what I would like to suggest that we should start considering is actually drawing on the amazing research that is taking place in the world of neurodevelopment and neurodevelopmental trauma. And what I mean by this is, at the moment, research has advanced so much that we are now beginning to have an understanding that there is an interplay between our biology and actually what happens to us in our care structure. The way we are treated determines the structure and functioning of our brain much more than we thought. Previously, we thought that genetics had us predetermined, and it was only a matter of us growing into our genetic programming and realizing it in full. Whereas now we're actually realizing that our genetic programming gives us a baseline of our possibilities. We have the possibility for being good and the possibility for being cruel, but if you live in a cruel and despairing environment, aspects of your gene expression which have to handle this level of cruelty get upregulated and expressed more dominantly. My point being that potentially this country is sitting on top of an emotional and public health time bomb in the way that it is not really paying attention to the urgency of care and the urgency of care for the most vulnerable, and actually seeing it as an absolute priority. If we think about defense, if we think about climate change, we should be thinking about the emotional health and the practical living circumstances of our children, because they grow up to be parents. So in this context, what I wanted to share with you is that we've carried out a lot of research in partnership with UCL and a range of other major sort of research and medical bodies in this country. And the upshot of it is this: in this country, in England, UCL found of the children that they assessed at Kids Company, 1 in 5 had been shot at and or stabbed, with 50% of the children witnessing shootings and stabbings in the last year. The research also showed that this constant state of being frightened was changing the functioning of these children's brains and actually making it very difficult for them to calm down and be able to manage their emotions and their energy. And it is only a matter of time that a child like this, constantly failing, constantly unable to engage, will discover that some kind of a substance like alcohol, like weed, like cocaine, will give them the mastery over their own brain and their own functioning that they don't have in themselves. Whether that mastery is effective or perverse, the fact is mastery is better than being completely out of control. And in this context, we have to bin the moralistic arguments that we've developed in order to justify the fact that we're not helping the vulnerable. The culture in this country has become one in which the governments, and I'm not making a singular political point, repeatedly governments get away with not meeting the needs of the most vulnerable by describing them as morally flawed. And in that context, they justify actually not understanding that it is the responsibility of a civil society to care for its vulnerable, because societies are systemic, and if they don't pay attention to the most vulnerable, even the wealthy who believe that their moral superiority is resulting in them succeeding will eventually discover that someone will pull you down if you've got up there in an unjustified way. And ignoring the most vulnerable and climbing over them to the top is unjustified climbing. So I want to show you really quickly to end. These are the repercussions. Some of you may have seen this. This is the comparison between a normal 3-year-old's brain and an extremely and severely neglected 3-year-old with sensory deprivation. But the reason I'm showing this to you is to just in a very simplistic way show you that the biology is now evidencing the fact that if you don't give proper care to people, you actually structurally and functionally damage their brains. But the also good news is that if you put the care back in place, that actually recovery and compensation on a neurobiological level can now be evidenced. And there's some really exciting results that researchers are soon to publish demonstrating the impact of care given by Kids Company staff to children, which actually altered the way their brains are going to function. And it's not unique to Kids Company. You do it every day, but you don't have the scanning machines with you to show the change. The chili pepper structure in the middle there, the corpus callosum that goes like that, is the central transit coordinating the right and left side of the brain and all the information processing and prioritizing. Come over here and have a look at this one. It's completely emaciated as a result of neglect. And this is the structure, this middle bit here, that I want you to look at. Look at the black cavities in the middle. If you don't have in your own brain the structure to control your own decision making and your own behavior, are you morally flawed or are you neurobiologically challenged? And that's where we need to change the narrative. It's not about avoiding free will. It's about giving free will the right equipment so that it can be exercised. And that comes from intensive care. This is evidence from the States. Look at the butterfly structures in the middle of the brain versus the maltreated brain, which is again enlarged. And there again, you see the impact of chronic abuse and neglect on structural development. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, the blatancy of the evidence. The neuron at the top has lots of branches coming on its sides. You get those kinds of development often as a result of interaction. In conditions of toxic stress, where stress is overwhelming, you see the emaciation of that neuron, where it loses actually structural development. And when there is lack of structural development, the branches are not there, then there is less connectivity between neurons, which means that there is less fabric in the brain. And these are the care conditions. This is the kitchen, the food cupboard of a family of 5. What I want to tell you is that when mothers and fathers are too ill to cope, their children pay a lifelong price. The children never chose to be in these conditions. Neither did a loving parent really choose to destroy their own children's childhood. If we don't stop simplistic narratives of blame, we will never become sophisticated enough to help our kids out there. And they want us to turn our intellectual rigor to care, because this country deserves to have a paradigm of care that is as first class as its defense mechanisms. Thank you very much.
Amazingly, Russell wants to say something.
Isn't that unlike me? I just wanted to say thanks. Sorry, Chip, I won't take up much of your time. Thank you very much, Camilla, for coming down, because what I think is important about what you explained then is about the moralistic argument. And loads of us that are addicts feel that this is a very significant aspect of what we suffer from, that we're somehow condemned or seen as morally flawed for our behaviour. Quite frankly, because some of it does end up being morally reprehensible. We do end up acting criminally because of a system that makes us criminals. Also, like when you talk about them kids and you show the dodgy versions of the brain, I think, oh, that's the one I've been saddled with. And anyone here that's an addict, that's the brain that you're dealing with. So, and the most importantly of all, I really like what you said about sort of like the financial circumstances that create that condition, that this doesn't happen in isolation. And this lends itself very well to what we've been talking about today about narratives, that what we need to create is communities where support is provided for children as young as 9 that are suffering from this condition throughout life. So this is really where we have a genuine opportunity to create these recovery communities with comic relief support. And I would just want to thank you very much, Camilla, for coming down and sharing your expertise and frankly flamboyant and wonderful dress sense with us. I'm very, very grateful. Cheers.
Thank you all for being so patient, not with Russell, but just all day. We now have the last question and answer session. I would like the panel, if they could, to introduce themselves, which will save me having to remember their names. So, could you are the microphones working?
James McDermott, Chair of Riot, Service User Group.
David Burrows, Member of Parliament for Southgate, Ministerial Aid to Oliver Letwin in relation to drugs and alcohol policy.
Wendy Dawson, Chief Executive of the Leigh Community Drug and Alcohol Residential Rehab in Oxford.
Elizabeth Burton Phillips, I'm the Chief Executive of Drug Fam and the writer of Mum, Can You Lend Me 20 Quid? What Drugs Did to My Family.
I'm Lisa Breyer. I am a recovering drug addict of 31 years. I am chairing this panel today. I just wanted to say thank you so much, Camilla, for an incredible speech. And, 31 years ago, I was putting heroin into my veins. And today, I am a trustee of Action on Addiction and a school governor and a mother of 16-year-old twin boys. And all I needed from the state was 6 weeks of treatment 31 years ago, and since then, it hasn't cost anyone anything. Just a few AA and NA meetings along the way. So we're going to open up now to questions for Elizabeth and Mike and David, and also Camilla and Wendy. So if there are any questions, we've only got about 10 minutes.
There's not one, great.
There must be one question for someone on this amazing panel. There we go.
Hi, I'm Devin. I work for Action on Addiction. At the beginning, one of the opening speeches, it was suggested that we need more sophistication in treatment. I wonder if the panel might suggest the directions they see that going.
Wendy, do you want to answer that?
Sorry, what was it? More sophistication? In terms of...
Sorry, in terms of the services that are offered to recovering alcoholics and drug addicts.
Okay, I don't actually think we need more sophistication. I think we need more understanding, and I think we need to be much more open, and we need to be able to have access to people to residential rehab, abstinence-based residential rehab. I think abstinence is the only way to recover. It was the only way that I was able to recover. I think it's not about the sophistication. I think politics and economics don't match. I think we need to be loud and proud. It was easier for me to come out being gay than it was for me to be able to come out that I was an ex-addict. I wouldn't have been in the position I am now if I'd come out earlier in my career. I think there's a huge amount of stigma that we need to break down. So I don't think it's about sophistication. I think it's about recognizing that recovery is actually available. Recovery is visible. We have a wealth and depth of experience and recovery in this room. I don't think we need to be sophisticated. I think we need to be heard by the commissioners, by the politicians, and I think they need to enable people to get into recovery by whatever means they want to, as long as they get the right intervention.
Lovely, thanks, Wendy. Any more questions?
Hello. Yeah, a couple of questions from the group, obviously. There's a huge culture of people wanting to give something back after they get into the early stages of recovery, and volunteering is one of them key elements. The welfare reform, there's been a few barriers, obviously. Some people wanting to volunteer, but then getting sanctioned. Do you know, is there a method that, obviously, the government could put in place just to give a period of, I don't know, flexibility? You know? Because the volunteering concept is huge and people do want to give a lot back, but they're fearful and they're isolating themselves, and we're seeing a lot of people relapsing back to them old behaviours because of lack of opportunity and things to do.
Mike, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, and I'll pass it on to the politicians. Dead right, though, where the question's coming from. One of the really great things about the sector and when it all works well is there is a steady a cycle of people who are getting their own recovery and wanting to give it back and being given opportunities to give it back. So whether you're doing that through a mutual support group or coming back and working in the sector or volunteering. So that should happen. It happens naturally. To a large extent, it doesn't need any help from funding or the government. But the welfare benefit rules get in the way of it quite a lot. We at RAPT, we do a lot of employing people who've been through their own recovery journey. No problem. You come to us, apply for a job, get a job, on you go. You get paid your wage. We have a lot of people who just help out through the fellowships and the networks and come and visits and tell their own stories and shares and all that sort of thing. No problem, because they got their own income, their own interests in other parts of their life. Those people who want to do what I call the stepping stones, bit of volunteering, bit of part-time work, bit of finding out if it's for them, it really struggles. The paperwork gets in the way. Now, I don't know if Ian Duncan-Smith's still in the room, but it's his department that oversees this, and I know there are a whole host of rules and reasons why those rules are there, so you can't just sweep them away. But it does seem really perverse. Is that exactly what the government wants, exactly what the welfare system wants, is people getting off benefit dependency, doing what they believe in, doing what they care about, and starting to get paid for it and building careers. The rules get in the way. It cannot be that hard to make exemptions, find ways around those rules. They've been there a long time. It's not just the last few years under the current system. Some version of those rules have been around for as long as I've been in this field. Surely we've got enough brain power to get those rules out of the way of this
Thank you,
situation.
Mike. Well, maybe David Burrows, our MP up here, who's very pro-recovery from addiction, might have something to say.
And the premise of the question is right. People in recovery, and I've met a number of people along my time as a member of parliament, leaders, heads of state, celebrities and others, but the most powerful people, the most inspirational people are people in recovery. And we need to harness that energy, and that's what we've been talking about here, about showing recovery's out there, and part of that is also to give the skills, give the confidence, so that they themselves can be the mentors to lead others into recovery. So we need to give that space. You're right, the question is to IDS, who's left the room, but the status quo that we inherited was pretty bureaucratic in terms of the time that you could sign off and on, and the work programme is intended to make that easier. And it's not just about the benefits, it's obviously about the space to be able to ensure that people don't just tick the box that means they aren't going to get into the housing ladder or to get onto the employment ladder. So I'm with you, we need to find ways. Part of the grant, the funding here can create that mechanisms locally that then we need to keep in step with people in their recovery journey and ensure that the system allows that to happen. So I'm with you, and we need to do more.
Thanks, David. I think, Elizabeth, you wanted to say something as well on that.
Yes, I think that it's really important that I emphasise the work that we do with DrugFam, which supports the families and the friends and carers of those whose lives are blighted by addiction. It's recognised. Thank you. And we really do welcome our volunteers, and many of those volunteers are in recovery and bring enormous positivity, strengths to the work that we're doing. You know, family members who are struggling to understand addiction, who are caught up in the cycle of it, they really do engage with those who come along to help us, maybe as volunteer facilitators, maybe just in the office, maybe doing one-to-ones, because you can explain to them what the addict's mind is thinking, how the addict's mind is thinking, and they find that very difficult to understand. So please do contact us if you're able to support us in our different support groups.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we can't leave out James McDermott at the end, who I know has something to say about this.
Very good question. It is a valid concern. And I think, there's a couple of things. I think the word volunteer doesn't quite sum up what we do. You should get rid of that word and find a better one. But for me, it's about us as a community. We've all been taught about taking responsibility. It's about us going to the work providers and the DWP and educating them on what it's like to volunteer and what we get from it. We can't sit here and expect the DWP to say, oh, you're all right, you've stopped taking drugs, have some time off. It's about us taking some responsibility and going and educating them as well.
Thanks, James. And I know we're running out of time pretty quickly. I think we've probably got time for one more question? Gentleman the lady back there. The lady on the aisle.
Thank you. My name is Miranda. I'm an alcoholic. I also work for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm taking a little bit of a risk here. I've been incredibly inspired by today, immensely so. I just wanted to put in a short mention a little word about why AA is not very visible, just in case there's anybody in the room that wonders why we aren't up on that platform today. Noreen rang me up and asked if I wanted to participate, but many of you may know, some of you may not know, we have sort of guiding principles because we're egomaniacs, and Russell's talked very eloquently and very charmingly and cleverly and sexily about that. And but we're there, and we're in the community. There are 800 meetings in London. There are over 4,000 meetings in this country. And we just, we quietly support this, but we're not allowed to do it in public. But I would like to say that I personally, as an alcoholic, quietly support the whole thing. And we're always there in the scout halls and the dusty church basements, hanging in there and loving each other. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Julie? And Russell's coming up. Coming to the end of the day, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody for today. Remember, people can and do get well, and it's down to us to take it out. Let's make this the first of many. Let's make the next one twice the size of this or 3 times the size of this. Because those of you that know me, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep making sure it bloody well happens. So let's keep driving it. And actually, I feel like we've just started this thing, and it hasn't. It's been going on years and years and years. But we started it as the first in the UK, abstinence only. So let's work together, let's stick together and keep driving this agenda. And please join RG UK, keep you up to date with all the policies, ask your views, everything. Go on the website and download and what have you, but you are absolutely fantastic. I want to say, you know, Russell, you know, what can you say? You know, really, what can you say? Chile, Comic Relief, who's been working with us, and of course Chip. You know, it's making it possible. So I'm sure that, I think that as the Give It Up, you know, Chip and I'm sure he wants to say something, as RG UK and the chairs and driving that forward and the representative body in the UK, it's about what we do in the UK and what we can deliver. Chip wants to say a few words, but I want Russell to have the last words. So I'm going to shut up, Noreen, for God's sake. Right.
I have very little to say. I just would like you to go back to your communities, try and spread the message of recovery as much as you can, and to speak to as many people as you are able to about your experiences if you're in recovery. And if you're not in recovery and you're professional, then I hope you've listened today to realize that recovery is available, and there are many avenues in which you can use to get people clean. Thank you.
What a lovely day it's been. I'm really, really grateful to have been part of it. But I think what's been evident is that these kind of organisations come about as a result of the incredible tenacity of some of the people involved. But this is representative of all of us that are addicts. This belongs to us all equally. And those of you that aren't addicts, thanks a lot, because like you just put up with our shit and they're still helping us. That's really, really very kind, and we obviously need your support. These organisations come around as a result of the brilliant strategic insight of women like Jilly, the fantastic, ferocious input and tenacity of this bloody woman, Noreen Oliver. She deserves an incredible... I've got much more of an absent father approach to this. Turn up, glamorous bit of bullshit, then off I fuck. Like this, but these people, they stay there and sort it out week in, week out, make sure the meals are on the table. And we've heard some incredible people today. I'm enormously grateful. Cheers, Camilla, for turning up here. Cheers, everyone that's spoken. I'm honoured to be part of RAPT. I think if we all stick together in this organisation, make sure it's backed up by proper data and proper information. There's a lot of onus on us to come up with ideas that work, but we're demonstrating among ourselves consistently that these ideas are truthful, and they spiritually make make sense to us as well, don't they? They're obviously very pure, very truthful things. I'm double grateful. Thanks, Chip, for sorting it all out. Noreen, I love you. You're wicked. Thanks all of you for being here. Cheers. We're on a lovely journey together, one day at a time. Thanks a lot. Cheers.